Hey there, Real Estate Junkies. Before we dive into today's episode, we've got some game changing resources to help you start buying and selling real estate on terms, the smart, creative way. Want to learn how to invest with little or no money down? Grab your free ebook, The 4 Game Plans, and discover the exact strategies we use every day. Get it now. The link is in the show notes. Looking for a complete step by step system to start making 3 paydays per deal? Check out the Quantum Leap System, our home study course packed with everything you need to close your first terms deal. Need a personalized strategy? Book a free one-on-one strategy session with one of our coaches. Just use coupon FREE3 at checkout. Ready to take action? Join the 3 Payday Apprentice Program and start working toward real estate success with direct mentorship. Want hands-on training with us? Spend 3 days at our In the Trenches Bootcamp, where we'll work side by side to lock in deals. And don't miss our biggest event of the year, QOS Live 2025. Connect with top investors, sharpen your skills, and take your business to the next level. Secure your spot today. All links are right below in the show notes. Click now and start building your real estate empire. Now, let's get into today's episode.
You got to train them. So what we recommend when you first come in is to get on the phones, get familiar with the scripts, get confident with the scripts, so you could theoretically then hand that off to somebody else to make dials, and you can train them. And then now you have more time to work on your follow-ups, going on appointments, sending around offers. Ideally, that's what you want. But when you're first starting like we did, we're on the phones, you're making cold calls, which you already alluded to. I was a phys ed teacher and a coach, and then trying to cold call and try to buy people's houses. That was nerve-wracking, right, to say the least. Welcome back to Real Estate Junkies Coast to Coast. I'm your co-host from the West Coast, Rusty Ham. Rick, you're on the East.
And I'm Rick Abbiati on the East Coast.
New Hampshire. We just got back from Rhode Island. A good trip. I didn't do a whole lot, just to be honest with you. I just sat there and listened and gave you my 2 cents. But we'll get into it at the end as far as what we did and how it went. We did do a podcast after the first day, so we can recap day 2 and day 3. Today, though, again, we always start out with a warm-up, which is our mindset, skill set, and systems. And you want to talk about, it's more of a mindset, right? We both went through the same journey as far as when we got our deals, but describe because terms is not easy. We tell people that, but they want to get a deal right away. So what's the mindset sometimes with associates that come in?
So I think the question comes up and everybody's got, how long will it take me to get a deal? And there is no real answer to that. The systems are there. Everything is there for you to get the skill set. And a lot of it comes down to mindset. And we've talked about this many times. And where it took me 15 months to get my first deal. A part of it was a commitment. I did take some time to test the waters to see if this was the real deal. It didn't take me long to figure out that it was, but then it was for a while. I felt not ever made cold calls before this, obviously. When they said make dials, I was making 9, 10 dials a day. And I remember my coach at the time when I did it was Brian O'Neill. Actually, he wasn't my coach. I did a strategy call with him. And he said, Rick, how many dials are you doing? And I proudly said 8 to 10. And he said, do you think you could bump it up to 15? And which wasn't a big deal. I bumped it up to 15. And then over time, 15 became 20, 20 became 25. And it went up from there in a day. It all depends on your level of commitment. And we all have baggage. That's the main thing.
Yeah, 100%. And I used to coach high school sports, mainly basketball for a long time. And I always told them, I'm looking for attitude and effort, right? And it's similar to our community. We match effort for effort. And we're looking for the serious and dedicated. So those are all synonymous, right? The attitude and effort. And you got to have that effort. I was in a similar situation. We both had full-time jobs. I had a full-time job teaching physical education. So I had to be at a school and we had a belt schedule, as everyone knows. And then I used to coach after school. So my time was limited. So when I first started, it took me a year to get my first house on the contract. I gave that house back. It took me 3 months to try to sell and it wouldn't sell. I got my second and third taken and sold 18 months later, or not. So in 18 months, so 6 months later after that. And when I first started, and you're saying 5 to 10, what were we saying? 5 to 10, everything? Or 8 to 10? Yeah. When I first started, I was probably doing 50 a week, which is not a whole lot. Like you said, it's like that's about 10 a day. And then I got a dialer and I started cranking out more dials during lunchtime. But when I first started, I was trying to make dials in between classes, or I would do free play soccer or send them on a mile run. And then I would crank out a couple more dials there. If you look at our numbers, and our effort was there. I'm not saying our effort wasn't there, Rick. It just, things get in the way. W-2 gets in the way, kids get in the way. I mean, if you look at it, because only 10 to 15% are going to pick up. So in my case, I'm making $50 a week. 5 are going to pick up. And out of those 5, I might get 1 or 2 leads a week. That's only 8 a month. That's not a lot. So of course it's going to take you a while, right? That's why we say it depends. Now, if you come in hot in the community and you're making 150, 200, 300 dials, obviously you're apt to get a deal quicker, right?
We've had some people pop their first deal within the first 90 days and even sooner than that. It's just because everybody's different. Some carry baggage with them. A lot of us do. And it's not to say nothing was happening during that first 15 months. Because when I hit that 15th month and I had upgraded to high 6 just prior to that, and I had VAs. I had a VA making dials with me, and I was building my pipeline because those deals that I got were from work I had done previously. And it was 3 consecutive months that I got deals, and then the fourth one a couple months later.
Yeah. And people, again, when you first come in, we try to keep the expenses low. So we get a VA, which is a virtual assistant. Most of the VAs we work with are from the Philippines. You got to train them. So what we recommend when you first come in is to get on the phones, get familiar with the scripts, get confident with the scripts, so you could theoretically then hand that off to somebody else to make dials, and you can train them. And then now you have more time to work on your follow-ups, going on appointments, sending around offers. Ideally, that's what you want. But when you're first starting like we did, we're on the phones, meaning you're making cold calls, which you already alluded to it. I was a phys ed teacher and a coach, and I'm trying to cold call and try to buy people's houses. That was nerve-wracking, right? To say the least. Yeah, but we just kept at it, right? We didn't quit. We took the advice of Chris, and Chris would tell us, hey, okay, this is what you need to do now. This is what you need to do now. This is what you need to do. We call stacking. And we took his advice, and then over time, and then in my situation, when COVID hit, people froze, right? A lot of companies went under. They didn't know how to deal with it. It actually benefited me because I'm teaching physical education at home in front of a computer. And so I would just flip on a video. All the videos were off. And so I would pop in the video, and then the classes, I think, were an hour long. So I'd pop in the video, and all their videos were off anyway. So I would go on mute, and then I would make dials during class. I was double dipping, and then we were done at noon. So then when we were done at noon, I had the rest of the day to make dials. So go figure, I start making more dials, and I pop two quickly, and I am getting 10 buyers in there, and I get these huge payday ones. And I'm like, oh, that's what I need to do. I need to stop and make more dials. 2 years later, I ended up doing that. But it comes down to you personally making time out of your schedule, however it takes, whatever it takes. If your why is big enough, you've talked about it multiple times. If you have a strong enough why, you're going to find ways to make dials.
Yeah. Yeah. The reward you can't beat anywhere. Just for the return on the time you spend and everything it takes to get that first deal is just amazing.
And that's what we talk about, attitude and effort. I could have gave up after a year and said, this isn't working for me. I don't have proof of concept. I haven't gotten a deal. Boo-hoo. I could have just given up at any time, but you and I didn't. It took you 18 months. Can you imagine? But the reward is, right? Would you give up 18 months to get the paycheck that you got, that first paycheck? That was a huge paycheck, right?
Yeah, it was 15 months, but the first one was $90,000. Yes, that's out of the ordinary, but still.
That's a year for somebody. So, you built that pipeline, you got better on the phone, you got more confident. You brought in your coaches when you were supposed to bring in your coaches, and then boom, it hit, and then they hit again, then it hit again. Same with me. I brought in my coaches, one hit, the next one hit. So it's just stay with it.
The one thing I can say is we both did 8 steps.
8 traits.
8 traits. 8 traits of successful associates. So
we did use those 8 traits, and we added a 9th, I think. But there are 8 traits, and you'll learn more of that coming in the community. The people that follow those 8 traits, Judy, who we've had on this podcast before, recently quit. She didn't quit. She's retired or resigned to do this full time, right? Because she does the 8 traits. She's followed every 8 trait. She's followed our directions. And now she's going to be in our boat where she's going to have so much more time during the day. That describe that conversation that you had with Chris when you went full time. It's a funny story. I want to hear it again.
That was nightly accountability.
Yeah.
Where we leave a voice text in the evening going through my KPIs or how many dials I did, how many people I talked to, how many leads I got, what my win for the day was, and any challenges. And we all do that. So I left my nightly accountability for Chris after I left my W-2, and I was full-time doing this. And I said, yep, I made 28 dials today, and went on with the rest of my questions and whatnot. And the first thing that came up at 4:30 in the morning when Chris is up is, Rick, huge red flag. Why are you full-time and only doing 28 dials? I only got once.
Yeah, so similar to Brian, right? Brian says, can't you do 15 or can't you do 20? Same with Chris. Chris is like, okay, you're full-time and you're making 28. I mean, we talk about the community. In a 50-minute session, if you're physically dialing the phone number from a list, you should be in the neighborhood of 25 to 35 dials, right? If you don't have a dialer that's doing it for you and all that kind of stuff. So the red flag is for everybody, Rick was full-time, meaning full-time investor, and he only did about an hour's worth of dialing. What'd you do with the other? So I did the same thing when I went full-time. I was like, okay, what do I do now? You've done multiple deals. Now you're in the $1 million revenue range. I'm pretty close to that too. But it took us a while after we went full-time to be like, okay, we're twiddling our thumbs during the day. What do I do? So let's move on to our game plan. And we're going to revisit an AO, but this is a different AO, Rick. And I was describing it to you before we got on this call. It's a duplex, which is unusual in Southern California. You don't see a whole lot of duplexes unless you're like Los Angeles. Los Angeles has a lot of duplexes. Where I live, which is near San Diego, a lot of single-story homes. It's very rare that you run into a duplex. This one is up in the mountains. It's close to Big Bear, if you guys know anything about Southern California. It has a upstairs rooms, and downstairs it has rooms and a bathroom. So you can padlock one of the doors that leads into the bottom. So it has stairs that leads up to the second floor. I talked to the seller in November. Again, this is what you talked about as far as selling your funnel. I talked to him in November, sent out a sub 2 offer. Actually, I was going to give him, my first offer was give him $25K up front on a sub 2, taking over to the hybrid sub 2 and our financing hybrid. He has a partner and he wants to pay off his partner. So he didn't like that. So he rented both of them, the top and the bottom. And it was a 6-month lease. Both of the leases were supposed to be done in June. Upstairs is still in. The downstairs says, we can't do this anymore. We're out. So that's when he contacted me. He said, hey, would you be willing to buy it sub 2 again? And I said, not for the down payment he wanted. He didn't want $40K. So I said, how about we do this? How about if I find the buyer for you and assign that buyer to you, that buyer would live in the bottom. And then once that buyer gets a loan, then that buyer could acquire the whole home and they acquire the renter that's upstairs. And then maybe they get some cash flow from the rent that they get from upstairs. So that's one way we could do duplexes. Do you have any thoughts or comments on that, Rick?
I think a duplex, one of the things we do with a tenant buyer is they have to have enough skin in the game to take the rents from the other unit. So usually we go with 20%. 20% down is considered enough skin in the game, and they've proven themselves making payments consistent over like a year's time frame. On one of the current properties I'm doing, it's a very difficult property. It's unusual where it's office space, but for the tenant buyer, we talked about it and decided that we'll 10% into it. We'll let them take the rents just to get the property to move. But it's insane.
Yeah, that's what we do in the beginning. Or to rent to own, we normally do 3 to 10%. And I guess I can present this to the seller. I didn't present that to the seller where, hey, if we got the buyer to 20%, then they can take over. But he wants cash flow. So he's going to get the rent from the tenant buyer, and then he's going to continue to rent the top for whatever it was. And so he's going to cash flow that until the tenant buyer cashes them out. Once the tenant buyer cashes them out, then the tenant buyer owns the whole property. And then, like I said, they can evict it, and then they can take over the second floor, or they can keep the renters up there and they can cash flow it. Whatever they want to do, because now they own that whole property. The difficulty with this property, it's in the mountains, just on the base of Big Bear. Big Bear is it's our ski resort, so to speak, down in Southern California. So it might be, someone might want to look at that as a property they want when they, maybe during the winter time, they'll go out there and they'll use it, or they go skiing up in Big Bear. But houses don't sell very well up there. And that's why I like AO, because then I can just make it contingent on finding a buyer. If I don't find the buyer, then that's okay. Never mind. I'm not committed to it. So that's an AO. We call it an executive lease purchase because the seller gets the advantages of staying in the middle, meaning they get the payday one or some of it. They get the cash flow if there is, they get the principal pay down, and they get the markup. So when I'm going to buy it at $460, I'm going to sell it at $490, and hopefully we get the 10% from the tenant buyer. But once we assign it, then we just take our portion of the down payment, and then we're hands off. Now, we're not completely hands off. And I don't know if you have an AO, Rick, where you've assigned it, but you still are in communication with the seller. I'm not sure. Yeah,
I am doing that on the one AO that I have. And it's mainly because the tenant buyer has additional down payments coming in or that are due at a certain time. So I'm just making sure that those are being done on time.
That's right. So yeah, if you do schedule, because again, we're looking for 10% right off the bat. If we can't, if we get 5, typically it's around 5 to 7, but we try to get them to 10% because obviously that's going to look better in the eyes of a lender at the end of the day. So we can schedule more down payments over that 24-month period. And so we're still technically tied to the seller. The tenant buyer would pay us, and then we would shoot over their half of the down payment. So yeah, they definitely make more, right? The seller makes more with an AO over time. He tried to sell it to me at $490, and he's like, I said, why $490? You're currently on the market at $460. I'm all out with fees and commissions. You're at around $430. He goes, yeah, but I'm looking at future prices. I'm like, it's in the mountains and it's not going to appreciate. $30,000 in 2 years. Trust me, it's not. So that's why also I'm going to the AO route, because there's no way I'm going to pay $490 today. Let's pivot to our cool down. I talked about the In Trenches boot camp. We were both there last week in Rhode Island. You guys saw it on YouTube. We were not in the same hotel room. It looked like it. We were both on the couches in separate rooms. And after that episode last week, that was after day one. We did a bunch of phone calls. Well, we didn't. Zach and Chris made a bunch of phone calls to the sellers, actually for the associates, to the sellers. Got a couple of appointments, got a couple of houses under contract, right? Let's describe two. So day two was
structuring the deals from the phone calls made the day before. We actually structured those out with the associates in the room, all together. So everybody took away a lot on that. And we will get, I don't remember how many offers, but there's some deals coming out of that.
Yeah, and I remember because we did some deal structure, which means we go through all the paydays, what all the payday 1s, 2s, and 3s looks like. But the best part was, I think this was day two when you spoke to Peter's seller. Was that day two? Or was that?
I think that was day one. That was in the afternoon on day one.
Yeah. Yeah. Day two is when you went over the contract. So that was cool because then people stayed over. We're technically down at 4 p.m. Eastern time. But we just stayed in the room while Chris and the staff left, and we were hanging out with some of the people there, and we were going over the purchase and sell agreement and how they needed to edit it, which was cool because people were just like, oh, this is cool. This coach is helping this associate out with the contract and making sure that all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted. So you guys are on your own. They're not going to catch all that stuff. They're going to mess up somewhere, and it's going to bite them in the butt, and they're going to lose money at the end of the day.
In fact, we did that twice. Well, two of the days.
Yeah, so we did Peters and Cars, and I'm assuming that they're super thankful that you went over that with them and you helped them out, which in the eyes of the people that were there were like, oh, this is cool. I get this type of help. They are literally in the trenches helping with contract, calling sellers, where the guy came back and wanted to renegotiate, and he renegotiated back to the original offer. So that was pretty cool. And then day three, shorter, right, the half day, a lot of Q&A. But what we did is we took one person and said, hey, what are your goals? Like, how do you want to exit your W-2 or whatever she wanted to do? And you've done that before, right? So describe day three.
So what we do is we figure out, and it was a lot of Q&A, but at the point where the one person had talked about their goals, and then we figured out, okay, how many deals is it going to take to accomplish that? And then from that point, okay, how many dials do you need to make to do you start off and say, okay, how many deals do you need? How many sold properties versus just having them on contract? And then we took the percentages, which is usually around 73, 75%, somewhere in there, of under contract. And then how many leads does it take? How many offers do you have to have gotten out to get that many under contract? And then how many appointments that was? And then how many leads to get those appointments? How many people you spoke to live to get the leads? And then how many dials, phone calls did it take to get that? So it lays out all of the KPIs you needed to get there.
Yeah, and you've created a spreadsheet for people to predict, right? This can be predictable. It's how many dials it takes. If you just get down to the brass tacks, if you know how many dials it takes in order to get a deal, then you predict, right? Created a spreadsheet for everybody that if they typed in what their average payday 1 is or whatever that is, and if they did X amount of deals per year, then that dollar amount will show up, and it's okay. If you want to leave your W-2, this is how many deals you need to get sold. And it's just right there in black and white. And again, it comes back to attitude and effort. If this is something you really want to do, you fill out your spreadsheet. Usually it's around 3 years in advance, and you go for it. You just go. Yep. It's scary. Trust me, it's scary. It's not, oh yeah, go. You got to put some thought behind it, right? We're not telling everybody to leave their W's, but put in the effort. Use your coaches is definitely doable for sure.
Yeah, the return on investment will definitely change your life.
Yeah. And yes, we're not saying that the coaching is free. It's not. But if you think about it in terms of buying a franchise, let's say you buy McDonald's, I'm sure there's a entry fee, right? You're buying a franchise. So buying a franchise is not free. And typically what I've heard in the past, when you buy a franchise like that, it takes roughly 5 to 7 years to break even. Is that accurate?
I think that's about what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're looking at 5 years of just nose to the ground, just grindstone, getting after it for 5 years, and then you eventually find the profit. With us, you got to pay for your coaching. But like you said, your first deal was K, which basically paid for your coaching. That was 15 months in your being an associate. So financially, it does make sense if you just got to put the numbers together and pull the trigger. If that makes sense.
With that spreadsheet also enables you to figure out, what do I want my business to look like 3 years from now? How many people, how many virtual assistants, how many executive assistants, how many buyer specialists, and how many seller specialists do you need? You project that in and figure out how many deals that would be, and it will lay out what scaling your business will do for you financially, and it's absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah, because people freak out when they're like, oh, if I scale, if I do this, then this is going to happen. Meaning if I scale, that's going to eat into my profits, which that's backwards thinking. You got to think forward. Like, okay, if I add this person to my team, that's going to generate X amount of revenue, which is going to exponentially grow my business. Cool stuff, man. Appreciate it. Thanks for jumping on tonight.
All right, Rusty, sounds good.
I'll see you this week on office hours, and take care, everybody.
All right, take care, everyone.